Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you everyone so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you all taking the time to join in and learn more about this really great grant opportunity. I'll go ahead and just go over some really quick housekeeping. Like I mentioned before, I would really appreciate if everyone could be on mute for right now during the presentation. We should have the chat option enabled. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to put them into the chat. We will also have a question and answer session at the end, giving ample amount of time for everyone to ask their questions. But do feel free to use the chat option as well. And I will be having my executive director, Diego, here answering questions in the chat as we go along and helping to answer some questions at the end here. So I will just do some quick introductions. To start off, my name is Skylar Potasic. For those of you who don't know me, I am the program manager for Northern Colorado Clean Cities. And I'll just take a quick moment to introduce Diego as well, if you just want to say hello.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Diego Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of Northern Colorado Clean Cities, and just very excited for all of you to be here today and learn about this great information. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, today we'll be going over the Charge Ahead Colorado grant, as I mentioned. This grant will be opening for an application period from January 24th to February 7th. So we just wanted to hold this workshop today to make everyone aware of this grant, just give a little bit more background on it and kind of just give some tips and tricks for applying. So to start off, as I mentioned, I am with Northern Colorado Clean Cities. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities program, which is a nationwide program. As part of the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies program, we work to build partnerships to advance affordable domestic alternative transportation fuels and technologies. And just a little bit about the Colorado Energy Office. So our role in Clean Cities also meshes in with the Colorado Energy Office. The Energy Office has a program called the Recharge Colorado program, and this program is focused on electric vehicle efforts. Myself and Diego are what they like to call recharge coaches. So we assist with everything from charging station grant opportunities and assistance, such as this Charge Ahead Colorado grant. Also, some educational outreach and workshops, infrastructure and vehicle advising, dealership support, EV group buys, and EV ride and drive events. And you can see on the map here to the right, there are several different Recharge Colorado territories throughout the state. And so Diego and I do our work in the yellow territory in the Northern Colorado region. So our agenda for today, we will be going over what exactly is Charge Ahead Colorado, who is eligible to apply, what are the eligible costs, what are the steps to apply, some application best practices, frequently asked questions, and then you will get some advice from a past successful applicant. Oops. Alrighty. So what is Charge Ahead Colorado? This program is an EV charging infrastructure grant program, and it is administered by the Colorado Energy Office and the Regional Air Quality Council. Since its inception in 2013, the Charge Ahead Colorado program has made awards for more than 1,000 EV charging stations across the state, with the main goal of really improving air quality and increasing EV adoption throughout the state. So the Regional Air Quality Council and the Colorado Energy Office will fund up to 80% of the cost of a level 2 or level 3 charging station through this grant, up to the following set maximums. So for a level 2 fleet only charging station, they will fund up to $6,000. For a level 2 dual port station, which can charge 2 vehicles at the same station, up to 25 kilowatts, they will fund up to $9,000. For a level 3 50 kilowatt charging station, they will fund $35,000. And then the level 3 DC fast charger 100 kilowatt charging station, they will fund up to $50,000. And that one does have a little bit more of limited availability. And just want to note that this grant does not cover level 1 charging stations, as those are most commonly found in the residential space. So who is eligible to apply for this grant? Workplaces and multifamily housing units are highly encouraged to apply. We see those very frequently through applications, and multifamily can range from apartment and condominium complexes, but other eligible applicants can include public, private, and nonprofit organizations, local governments and municipalities, school districts, state and federal agencies, businesses that own multi-vehicle parking facilities, hotels and tourist destinations, universities, electric utilities, healthcare facilities, and car dealerships. And those are just some examples. And again, this grant is not intended for residential charging stations. So what are the eligible costs? The eligible costs that this grant covers are charging stations themselves and the related equipment, also the construction materials, as well as the construction labor. Electrical permits through your city or county are included in the cost. Utility and electric upgrades, such as new upgraded transformers, breaker boxes, and electrical panels. Also signage, as you can see in the picture below. Signage is a really important aspect of charging station projects. And then networking, so being able to enable Wi-Fi settings on your charger, that's included as well. And then the ineligible costs would include sales tax and shipping for purchases. So what are the steps to apply for this grant? The first step that we recommend is reviewing the Charge Ahead Colorado page on the Colorado Energy Office website. And we have this linked here. We can also include that in the chat. And this page offers many great resources to prepare you for applying. So they have an application guide that you can review before applying. The second thing that we recommend is setting up an advising session, a free advising session with your recharge coach. So recharge coaches offer these free advising services to help applicants apply for the grant. And my email address is here. I will also put that in the chat as well. So Diego and I, as I mentioned, are recharge coaches, and we can help you walk you through the process, review your application for you, and try to ensure that you have a successful application. Next, you will have to choose the location and the type of charger, as well as the amount of chargers to fit your facility's needs. Next, we recommend contacting your electric utility to find out the rates and costs associated with adding an EV charging station onto your electric load. Next, contacting your city or county for information on permitting fees, just so that you're aware of how much it will cost to get an electrical permit. We do note that you should not purchase this permit before being granted the award, just to ensure that you do get reimbursed for that permit. And then we recommend that you contact 2 to 3 charging station vendors for bids. So these vendors can provide a site analysis as a part of their free quote. And they'll be able to give you information on their specific charger that they offer. Again, you should not make a decision or a purchase of a charger until after being granted the award. And then if you're a workplace or a multifamily unit or a homeowners association, it's important to complete an employee or resident survey and just send it out to a couple employees or residents to demonstrate that there is a demand for charging stations at your facility. And this will just make your application a little bit stronger. And then finally, once all these steps are completed, you can begin your application in the Word formatted application document. So right now, since the grant isn't open yet, you can still begin to fill out some questions in this Word formatted application that they provide for you. And then once the grant opens up, you'll be able to copy and paste your answers onto the application. So next we can go over some application best practices. So just some tips to have an even stronger application. So first is any sustainability plans or goals that your facility has. So say you were a business that has goals to increase renewable energy at your facility, that'll definitely be something that you want to include in your application, just to show that you have these sustainability goals that align with adding an EV charging station to your facility, and just showing that you care about environmental protection and sustainability. Next, having a good rationale for where you're going to be placing your charging station. So if you are in a location that's, say, maybe more rural, you know that there's not any EV charging stations within several miles of you, this is definitely something that you want to put onto your application and explain, because it's just showing that you are working towards kind of closing that EV charging station gap. And then any other sort of rationale, if you are, say, a tourist destination, you get a lot of car traffic at your facility, that will definitely make your application stronger. Just kind of showing that you are pursuing the same goals as the energy office to just increase more EV adoption throughout the state. Next, the application will want you to confirm that you have a funding match that exceeds the minimum of 20%. So as I mentioned before, the grant covers up to 80% of the charging station project. So they just want to make sure that you have that funding match. And this match can come from kind of a few different sources. Some electric utilities definitely offer EV charging station rebates and incentives, so that can provide some extra funding, and that can definitely count towards your match. Next, they will want to see that you can agree to report charging station data every 6 months to the energy office for 5 years. So you just want to make sure that you have some sort of maintenance plans in place to show that you'll be able to take care of your charging station and just be able to report usage data back to the energy office. And then, as always with any application, you're going to want to write in full and complete sentences. So this slide here shows, this is the front page for the grant application. And then I will show you guys a little bit about what the application looks like. So we have, the first part is going to be your contact information and just background about your organization. So your address. Next, they're just going to go over some mandatory criteria. So you can all read on this in your own time, but just gives you some more information about the grant and what it entails. It'll go over the scope and project justification. So just describing your project, justifying why it's an important project, kind of like I mentioned, that rationale for the location of your station. Next, planning criteria. So this section will kind of just go over securing the cost match funds and any other sort of planning documents. Also, this section is where you can submit the employer resident survey to show that demand for the charging station. Again, providing the address for the charging station, description of the site location and nearby amenities. So this question is really important because it'll just make your application more competitive to show that you have some amenities around the charging station that people who are charging their car can use. So if they're charging their car for a few hours, it's always nice to be able to have a bathroom, maybe some restaurants nearby if you're in more of an urban area. So having any sort of facilities nearby, you'll definitely want to include that on your application. And then the next section will be the funding request. So this is the portion where it's really important that you contact those vendors, contact your city for permitting so that you can get a ballpark estimate of how much your station project is going to cost in total, because this is where you'll be requesting that funding. And then just some federal certifications and documents that they'll want to get from you, such as your W-9. Reporting requirements, this is just where you'll put your signature to agree that you'll be able to report the usage data on your station. And then just some final documents. And then the last section is just additional relevant information. So how did you hear about the program, and just some additional questions. So all in all, it's not a super long application, but it does go to show that having a recharge coach to kind of walk you through that process will definitely help you to be successful and just make sure that you're not missing anything. And now we'll go over just some really frequently asked questions. So the first question that we get a lot is, does your charging station need to be open to the public? So technically, it does not need to be open to the public. However, public charging station projects are definitely given some more preference and are definitely more competitive. Because, as I mentioned before, the energy office their main goal in administering this grant is really just to see more EVs get on the road. And that goes hand in hand with having more charging stations. So if you have a public charging station project that is completely open to the public for anyone to use, that's definitely going to give you some more preference. Next, do I need to do any electrical work before I submit my application? No. So it's really important that you do not do any work or make any purchases until after you get a notice that you are awarded the grant. Next is the 80% cost match given prior to the start of the project or as a reimbursement. So the grant is awarded as a reimbursement after your final invoice is sent in at the completion of your project. So after you turn in your application, you will get a notice of award within 4 to 6 weeks. Once you're given that notice, then you can go ahead and make your purchases, do your electrical work, order the charging station itself. And then at the completion of your project is when you can send in all of those receipts and invoices, and then be able to get your reimbursement just a few weeks after your project is completed. And so that kind of leads me to the next question: how long do I have to complete my project? So the Energy Office really wants projects to be completed within 4 to 6 months. And that's also why we kind of recommend that you do some work before you submit your application, so that you just have a good idea of the amount of work that you're going to have to be doing, like what electrical upgrades you'll need, what kind of different charging stations are out there, so that you have a good idea of what you're wanting. And that way, once you are awarded the grant, you can be good to go and just start getting your project rolling. And then finally, are there any rules for the cost match? So I think I mentioned this briefly before, but you can use other grants and other incentives for your cost match, such as electric utility rebates. So if you're in Xcel Energy territory, Xcel has some really great rebates that you can kind of stack on, and that just lowers your personal cost match that you have to pay. However, it's important to note that federal funds cannot be used for the 20% cost match. And like I mentioned at the end, we will definitely be going over some more questions and answers. So now it's time to turn it over to Amelia. So Amelia is one of our past applicants for the grant, and Petdine, who Amelia works for, was awarded the grant, and she worked really diligently to have a really great application. So we wanted to bring her in tonight and just go over her project and her experience applying for the grant, and be able to answer some questions for you guys as well. So at this time, I will turn it over to Amelia.
Thanks, Skylar. Hi, I'm Amelia. Amelia Denbour. I'm a sustainability manager at Petdine, like Skylar just said, and we did apply for this grant during the last session that it was open. So I think Diego's in the chat right now talking about how it's open, multiple times a year. So just a couple of months ago, we applied and were awarded this grant, which was really exciting. We were actually awarded for 2 facilities. So I guess that's something to note, is that if you do have, say, multiple facilities at your workplace and you would like to have multiple chargers, you just fill out multiple applications for that and you can get multiple grants, which is really exciting. So we have our headquarters is in Fort Collins, and then we also have a new manufacturing facility in Windsor. So we were able to get the grant for both of those to get some chargers in, which I'm super excited about. As you can see from this picture on here, that's actually from our facility that we have in Illinois, but that's our solar array, which is super cute, and I absolutely love it. So you can see that sustainability is just really important to Petdine, and something that we try to integrate into everything. So this was a really good fit for us. As far as how long this took, I would definitely say it took less than 10 hours. Probably took me around 8. I was going through my calendar in preparation for this call and trying to look up how long it did take. And I spent 4 hours with Skylar and Diego. So thank you guys so much for putting up with me and all of my questions. I have no idea if that is average or what that looks like. But I had loads of questions and they were super patient. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I can really give to anyone, is definitely, if you're thinking about using this, applying for this grant at all, definitely have a coach. They were the biggest lifesavers for me, and at least made me feel like there was no such thing as a stupid question. Anytime that I maybe wasn't sure about how a question was phrased or how I should phrase my answer or what something meant, I could reach out to them. They were super responsive, very helpful. They've done this many times. They know what they're talking about, and they had answers and didn't make me feel silly for asking at all, which was great. I spent about 2 months from the time that I started thinking about this grant until I hit submit on the application. It could probably be done in a shorter amount of time, or a longer amount of time. I know some people in the chat have been talking about, taking longer to start looking at grants and all of that, which does bring me to my next bit of advice right at the beginning. I think one of the most important things to do is to start having conversations, whether that's with the utilities, with potential vendors. And if you are an HOA or a workplace, getting that survey out to your potential respondents, whether those are your residents or your employees, just to give them time to be able to respond and give you time to also then be able to compile their answers, right? So the rest of the questions are very straightforward and you can just kind of answer them. But anything that requires a response usually, can take a bit longer. So move that maybe to the front of the list. Definitely think about your why and your how, right? So why are you doing this? Like, it's a grant and it covers 80%, and that's amazing. And I think it's really easy to just want to do it because you can. But why are you doing this? Does it fit in with your company's goals? Are there people that are going to use it? Are you near something? Does it fit into, your carbon plans? Do you have scope 3 emissions goals? Like, what does that look like for you? Why are you interested? And then what will the implementation look like? Is this going to be something that you charge for or offer for free to your employees or your customers, visitors, whoever that might be? Or are you charging for this? Is it going to be publicly available? Is it going to be maybe only available to your staff while you're open, and then after you're closed, it can be publicly available? You're allowed to have those types of answers, yes and type answers, where sometimes it's public and sometimes it's private, or some people it might be free and sometimes you charge. But just think about, if I were to be awarded this grant, what would it actually look like in practice? And obviously, the more thinking that you do ahead of time, the easier it is to complete the grant. I know for me, there was a fair amount of copy pasting when they ask about, the sustainability goals and all that. I was, oh, great, that's on our website. I can just pull that, which was super helpful to be able to do. So if it's something that you haven't been thinking about before, that might make your application take a bit longer, but just something to be thinking about even prior to starting your application. What would it look like and why is that important to us? I know for me, my biggest challenge was trying to find something interesting nearby. So I was representing PetDine. We have fairly industrial workplaces, and they're not next to tourist attractions or necessarily restaurants or anything super fun like that. It was, sorry, my dog is sneezing. But it was primarily done for our staff, our employees. But you would be surprised if you pull up Google Maps or take a drive through your neighborhood, there's a little bit more going on than you probably think. But honestly, even if there isn't, which again, there really wasn't for mine, we were still awarded the grant. So definitely still apply, even if you think you don't check every single box, 10 out of 10, that's okay. No one probably does. And that's all right. So there's definitely, at least I feel like, a bit of leniency there. I think that's mostly all I had. I don't know if there's questions now or if we're throwing them all at the end or what that looks like. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amelia. That was a really great description of your project and some really good advice. I think what definitely hits home is just, like you mentioned, you don't have to check every box. So definitely do not be discouraged about applying. Definitely recommend that everyone applies, And as Amelia mentioned, it's not an extravagantly long process. So definitely recommend just giving it a shot and applying. And you definitely can apply for multiple rounds. So yeah, thank you so much, Amelia. And I believe my next slide is questions. Yep. So wanted to make sure that I give everyone ample time to ask questions. I have some resources at the bottom of this slide here. So the Energy Office website, as well as my email address and contact info to continue to ask any questions, or if you'd like to schedule an advising session, definitely feel free to do so. So we can start taking some questions now.
Skylar, it might be a good idea also, just in case some of you guys are just on like a phone call and can't see some of the chat, I'll probably ask you some of the questions, really good questions that were going on in the chat. And if you have more questions, either raise your hand, there's a raise your hand feature, or feel free to put it into the chat as well. But what about design costs and prep for application costs? So I guess, does the grant include design costs and permitting costs?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it definitely does cover those permitting costs. That's why we recommend that you do contact your city or county before applying, just to get an estimate of what that cost will be. And it does cover the design costs as well.
Perfect. And I think that, as well, I see here, Jake, you're a contractor as well. So you can perhaps give us another kind of view of this as well. If you can answer maybe the design costs, it definitely covers it, but what are they typically looking for? And I added here a list of our own electric contractors that we have worked with. So you can find Jake's information there. But yeah, Jake, do you have any information on design costs?
I mean, typically for the standard level 2 projects, the electrical design or, site design is usually pretty straightforward. I mean, it's very dependent on what municipality or AHJ the project's being installed in. But I would say most design costs would be, some number $100 or $500. Permitting fees are probably going to be somewhere $300-400 to $1,000 for slightly more complex projects. Obviously, for level 3 projects, those numbers are going to probably be larger.
Perfect.
And and certainly a contractor can come out and look at your project and give you a better idea of all these variables.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Yeah. And again, if you guys have any other questions, please put them in the chat. But yeah, Jake, that was a great kind of recommendation and information there. Let's see here. Are there any other kinds of other general questions? Should we have a contractor in mind before applying? How do we know if we can put one on a city block, for example? It's definitely working with your recharge coach and working with Skylar is going to be your first thing. So yeah, I think Skylar has mentioned again, you can definitely get bids, you can get information, but no work should be done prior to getting or awarding getting awarded the grant. So let's see here. Will the presentation be available after the workshop? Yes. So the presentation is going to be recorded. It's going to be on our YouTube page. So do find a lot more information on our YouTube page and our website. But this will also be, the chat will be downloaded, the video will be downloaded and sent out via email as well. Let's see, is there any other? Can charging stations include solar panels? Are there extra points for renewable energy sources? Yeah, Skylar, can you answer that one?
Yeah, you can definitely pair your charging station if you have existing solar, or if you'd like to add solar onto the project. They definitely do go hand in hand, both sustainability wise, as well as kind of just the general efficiency. So you can set it up so that your charging station is getting that electricity from your solar panel, and kind of offsetting those electric costs, as solar tends to be a little more, I don't know, I'd say financially feasible perhaps. And then you can definitely include, if you're wanting to include solar onto your project, definitely include that in your application. And that's something that the energy office will see as a benefit to your application. So some extra benefits there.
And continue to work with us depending on additional technology or needs of the location. There are other grants. I mentioned in the chat, there's also tax incentives. There's also some other grants and rebates through utilities. And maybe I'll throw it to, Amelia, did you all use any grants or anything else for the solar or any other things that you guys are looking for?
Yeah, so full disclosure, just for everybody else. We were awarded this grant, but it was in December. And then, as was noted a couple of times in this session, that you really can't move forward until not only you're awarded, but you also need to get your official PO from the state. And I am actually still waiting on that at this time. So I haven't been able to officially start the project or start paying for anything or contract with anyone or anything like that. But I have gone through the grant process and been awarded through the application portion, so I can speak to that. And then as far as solar, yeah, there definitely are other opportunities out there if that's what you're interested in, even through, potentially your utility provider. There's a lot of really interesting stuff out there. So there are opportunities.
And a follow-up question as well. What was your experience with permitting? And have you gone through that? Yeah, what was your permitting process in particular with Fort Collins? That was another follow-up question.
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, I don't have the documentation from the state to actually be able to begin any of our work yet. So I haven't been able to start that, but I was able to speak with them right throughout the application process. You're going to want to talk and get a feel for what that's going to look like. And yeah, the city of Fort Collins and the city of Windsor both had very straightforward processes, really easy to talk to the people that work for the city. So I don't anticipate any major issues with either of those cities. They've definitely also worked with this grant before, which is really nice. They know what they're doing. I know for me, I guess this was probably an important thing to note. This was the first grant that I ever applied for. I am not a grant writer at all, could not be farther from one. So it's been really great for me that obviously Diego and Skylar were fantastic, but everybody at the city and the utilities, which were different for both of my sites, they were all easy to work with and knew what I was talking about. And the potential vendors that I talked with had also already worked with this grant before. So kind of everybody else in this space already knows what they're talking about. Even if you are new, you can feel a lot better going into this, kind of knowing that everybody else has been through it before and they're more than happy to walk you through it.
And I might have another kind of follow-up question here, but yes, essentially just connect with Skylar or us. And if you're having a trouble getting connected with a city employee or someone, we can help you. We can help you get connected. That's something that we're here for. So another kind of question for you, Amelia, about your project was are you planning to cover it or uncover for your surface lot?
They are both uncovered, and we have intentions of keeping them that way.
Okay. Yeah, and a little bit more to that, Christy, we're seeing actually a lot of dealerships looking into covered spaces, in particular with solar. It's just kind of serves as a dual purpose, both kind of mitigating demand rates, and then also it kind of helps with car insurance. So, that can definitely be kind of transferred. That information can be transferred over to other projects. So depending on the design or depending on the location, we can help you with kind of understanding, should you, again, include solar, should it be covered or uncovered? can you please go over handicap accessible requirements for the grant application? So yeah, so there are handicap accessible requirements. I can go ahead and put into the chat. I will have to look online, but essentially they're pretty much very straightforward. As long as you're not impeding handicap spaces, you should be fine. But in reality, what we're really also trying to do is serve more equity. So if they can be designed in tandem with handicap spaces, where you can have a maximum kind of space for your EV space, even if someone is again driving kind of with limited mobility. I think that that's something that's really great. So I'll actually look for handicap accessible requirements, and I'll put that into the chat. That's a really great question. One of our counties requires a PE stamp by electrical and mechanical engineer to expedite permit. Is that normal? And do contractors provide PE stamps? It is based on the county. It's based on the location. I think Fort Collins was a lot more straightforward, and they really don't require someone outside. They do have kind of an in-house PE, but that is something that I haven't really run into as far as a barrier, but that should be something that's covered by the grant as well. Again, 80% of the cost of the grant should be covered, and permitting is definitely included. But let's work together, Paul, more on that project. What is the average range of cost to buy and install a level 2 dual charging station? Skylar, yeah, why don't you ask that one or answer that one?
So I'd say between $10,000 to $12,000, correct me if I'm wrong, Diego, that we're seeing for a total cost. But then with the grant for level 2, you can get up to $9,000. So that reduces your cost to just a few $1,000s that you can add other grants and incentives onto, such as the utility rebates, as we mentioned.
Yeah, again, it really depends on the design. If you have a interesting system where it can just be wall mounted, that's going to be much cheaper than having to dig up ground and trench. Once you start having to trench ground and concrete and things like that, the cost will increase. So yeah, anywhere from even, I've seen as low as 5,000. If you're getting even more charging stations, the cost can lower as well per charging station, but upwards of 15,000. And then a level 3 charging station, again, charging your vehicle within an hour to 2 hours, that can be anywhere from 40,000 all the way to 70,000. So, and again, the grant covers 80% typically of that cost. We are considering leasing the actual charging head hardware, so they cover the maintenance, upgrade, etc. Can we get a grant for the other construction type costs? Great question, actually, because both utility and grants can cover even just the make ready or the equipment. So either or, if the total cost of the project, again, it's 80% up to that amount. So that can be, awarded. But again, typically the grant will only be awarded or the funds will be given to you after that final installation date or proof of installation. So do keep that in mind. But yeah, Skylar, do you have anything to add to that, or even Jake? Do you have anything? Have you seen projects where they lease charging head hardware?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's becoming more common. And if you just think of cars, a lot of people are leasing cars. It's just the same model. Instead of buying your $20,000 car or your $20,000 charging station, you just lease it on a monthly or annual basis. And I mean, a lot of people find that better, just especially businesses, I think, with cash flow. So I think like working with, as you described, working with the grant process, getting the actual, get this, all the stuff to get the project in the ground, and then you can lease it and moving forward. And then as Phil said, yeah, then the charging company basically just sells you charging as a service.
And let's see here. What are typical data reporting systems? Another really great question here. It really does depend on the type of system that you have. Sometimes these systems are very much smart enabled, and it's on your phone, so you can directly send reports from your phone to the Colorado Energy Office. Others, they can print those out via an email. They send you kind of quarterly information. So it does kind of depend on what type of system that you get and how much data you're actually wanting to get from that system. Yeah, Skylar, do you have any other information on data? Is the actual, yeah.
I don't think I can speak too much more about the data reporting.
And then is the data kind of a follow-up? Is the data the actual amount of watts passed through? So typically they only ask 4 or 5 very basic questions. So they are asking kind of the amount of kilowatt hours that is used over kind of 6 months. They also ask for the amount of vehicles charging in around 6 months. And I think the others is if there's been any maintenance issues. So these questions are pretty straightforward. They're not going to be very difficult to answer depending on the system that you're getting. For Amelia, did you have handicap access requirements for the FC codes?
So I don't believe there are any additional requirements from the city of Fort Collins. But I will say, I believe the handicap requirement is semi-new, and they don't have to be marked spots, like only for people who have a handicap parking pass. But there's a certain percentage of the amount of spots that need to be accessible, with a minimum of that being 1. But that's just about the size of the parking spot, like how Diego was speaking about. It's just size. You don't need the painting or the restriction or anything like that.
And I went ahead and put into the chat here the ADA requirements that are typical for electric vehicle charging spaces. I can even share my screen here. Or no, once you click onto that spot, page number 4 gives you a really great kind of visual of, again, kind of how much space you do want for an EV space. And really, when you're thinking about it, typically the designated accessible space is closer to the front. And that's typically where the electrical equipment is best kind of accessed and really kind of a benefit of EVs and EV drivers is that you can kind of park in front and you don't have to kind of find all of these different parking spaces. So yeah, this is a really good kind of guide to use for ADA requirements. Last question here. Let's see here. If we are in downtown, do we need to worry about vandalism? What type of security is needed, if any? Really good question. So a lot of different charging stations these days are really implementing different security features. And one of them in particular is kind of a locking mechanism where you're not able to release the charging station cord until you actually pay. Or show proof that you're within the system. And then even when it is in your vehicle, again, this is changing. This is not every vehicle, but a lot of times there's also a locking mechanism for the charging station cable. So you can't yank it out. And that's really speaks more to the signage as well. to have a queue system, you're wanting to have maybe a small sign stating that you should be there for 2 to 3 hours, because someone can't just yank that cord off and start using it typically. So that's a good question. Again, security is becoming more and more of a feature within charging stations. Really, really good question.
I would also include cybersecurity as well with the newer, more Wi-Fi enabled network systems. I believe that they have certain cybersecurity measures just to make it more secure.
That's a really good point. Yeah, if you're, for instance, a hospital, or if you're a school and you're not wanting to have any kind of issues with hacking, cybersecurity issues, a lot of times the system is completely separate, or you can set up that system where it's completely separate, and there's no possibility of kind of a cybersecurity issue. Really great question. Any follow-up questions? Again, this will be recorded. We'll be sending out this chat in our email. If you have any questions, Skylar's email is there, and the phone number's there. Please set up a free advising session with us. If you have, again, a workplace, a location that can use a charging station. And great point, Jake. A lot of charging stations are, again, using a cellular connection, so they don't use a Wi-Fi connection. Again, kind of a cybersecurity feature.
Oh, and I see that Amelia sent a message. I think it's sent to only me and not the whole group, but Amelia was saying that she has an EV, and for her Bolt, if it's unplugged while charging, the car alarm goes off as sort of a security feature there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a lot of other cars, like Teslas, have a lot of cameras these days, so they should have a lot more security.
Yeah, so if anyone has any more questions, do feel free to type them in the chat or just take yourself off mute and ask any last minute questions. And please feel free to send me an email with any sort of in-depth questions if you want to be connected to any other resource that we mentioned tonight. We would be happy to connect you with anyone that you need to be connected with.
And I'll go ahead and also put into the chat, become a free member today. And then also here's a event page. There's going to be tons of other events we're hoping to do. So yeah, visit our website, visit our YouTube link for more information. But thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your night tonight to learn more about this grant. And yeah, just really excited to share all this information with you all. And we will be sending a follow-up email, as Diego mentioned, with this presentation and some more resources. Alrighty.